Hello,
Hello,
and
and
welcome back to the 2 Cents Podcast.
and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
This week's podcast is brought to you by Public. So we broke down our budget in prior episodes, and one of the things we've invested our money in recently in our budget is a bond account with Public. So here's how it works. You deposit $1,000 or more into a bond account. That's what we did. Sorry, let me adjust myself. And that money gets invested into a portfolio of 10 investment grade and high yield corporate bonds. You hold those bonds until they reach maturity to maximize on the returns, and you get regular interest payments while you wait. But my favorite part of a bond account is that the yield you get is locked in and it's not going to fluctuate with the economy. We got a 6.61% yield, which I would say is pretty good, and I'm pretty excited about it. If you're interested in learning more about Public and want to lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account like us, visit public.com/STS, and thanks again to Public for sponsoring our pod. Brought to you by Public Investing. Member FINRA plus SIPC. The yield is the average annualized yield to worst across all 10 bonds in the bond account before fees as of October 2nd, 2024. Your yield to worst is not locked in until the time of purchase. A bond's yield to worst is not guaranteed. You can earn less if you do not hold the bonds to maturity or the issuer defaults. Not an investment recommendation. All investing involves risk. Visit public.com/disclosures/bond-account for more info. Welcome back. As you can tell, we are wearing slightly different outfits this time. We figured, let's have some fun with it. It's Halloween tomorrow. Let's wear, a fun costume that is green themed. So this is actually kind of a teaser. This is going to be the outfit we're going to wear when we go film outside. So you may have already seen these outfits if you've been watching our videos. But what are we talking about today, James?
Workplace trauma.
So casual. Workplace trauma. We figured it's about to be Halloween, so maybe we should tell you all some of our workplace horror stories.
Yeah, get you guys in the scary mood,
Spooky season.
Spooky season.
We both have had a bunch of different jobs in different avenues, I guess. You were in the military, then you did sales.
Yeah, I did sales, selling windows, roofs, and kitchens. From there, became a car salesman. Did executive assistance work at the Pentagon. Before I migrated back into psychological operations, information operations.
Yeah.
But as a contractor.
Same. I had towards the end of my professional career before becoming a content creator and wearing a Teletubby costume on a podcast for my living. Real reflections going on right now,
Right.
and I would not do anything different. But before that, I was also a government contractor, but I was a data analyst by trade, I suppose. But before that, when I was in school and college, I did basically any type of service job you can think of under the sun. I worked at Starbucks, I worked at Gold's Gym, I worked at you name it, Culver's. I've done it all. But some of my most traumatic jobs, I would say, were definitely in serving. I used to be a cocktail waitress. Some of my stories are definitely from serving and working at Starbucks, which I hope they don't come after me for this, but that was probably my worst job, and I'm happy to explain why. But James, I think you should kick us off with the first workplace horror story.
Yeah, so we had this discussion earlier, trying to figure out what workplace horror stories we were going to tell. And I told her that because of, childhood trauma and stuff like that, I didn't look at workplace horror or workplace trauma the same way. When you live a rough childhood, everything else after that kind of just seems like easy work.
You're like, I've been through this before.
Right,
This is fine.
all right, I'm fed, so that's the important part. But with that, I do have a few stories. First one starting off is with the Marine Corps. So for those of you who don't know, Marine Corps boot camp isn't fun, and it's not supposed to be. But with that, one time that I remember very vividly, because a lot of it, of the 3-month process, a lot of it kind of just merges together. You're exhausted all the time and you're just constantly moving. But one time that stood out to me was, I remember we were in our class phase. So I think it was the first month, towards the end of the first month. You're still super exhausted because you barely sleep. You're up at 4, 5 o'clock in the morning every morning, and you're going to sleep at, 11, 12 o'clock.
They keep you exhausted.
They keep you mentally exhausted. And that's on purpose. I definitely understand the meaning behind that.
I have my thoughts about the military. I am grateful for your service, but that is
Thank
just
you.
so
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey,
why?
it
Can't we just
works.
all get along?
No. But yeah, so we're in our class period, and with that we all go to the auditorium to, receive classes from these people. Uh but the thing is that you don't want to fall asleep in those classes. So we're all exhausted but not supposed to sleep
Because you'd get in trouble.
cuz you get in trouble. So my bright idea was like, "Hey, why don't I go to the bathroom or the head? Why don't I go to the bathroom and that'll
Why is
help
it
wake
called the
me up?"
head?
The head. It's because we're a branch or a department of the Navy, and a lot of the terms that we use are ship terms or like naval terms.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've never heard that before. Okay, sorry. Go
Yeah, so
keep
like
going.
bulkhead, that's the wall,
Mm.
things like that. But so we're like, all right, I'm gonna go to the head. I get up out my seat, I ask permission to go to the head. I'm granted permission. I start walking there. And on my way, because I was in San Diego, so everything's outside. So I had to go outside of the gym, walk outside down to the head and then back. And I look to my right and I see two guys being IT'd, which they call incentivized training.
What is that?
It's kind of like F45, but just mean. And you don't,
Remember the time I took you to F45 with me and you were like,
yeah.
I'm never doing that again. You were so mad at me.
Yeah.
You
So
went through it already. So, it was
that
the
does,
trauma
yeah,
coming
that
back.
that
That's what
doesn't
it
mean
was.
that I want to do it again. Like, hey, if I got jumped, I wouldn't be like, oh, well, let me go get jumped in a boxing class because that's
You
fun.
could show your strength. You could be like, this
Right.
thing is
No.
nothing to me. Okay,
But
keep going.
yeah, so I look to my right and there's two guys being IT'd. And what that looks like is two recruits on their face and two drill instructors screaming above them, push up, push, 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 Sasha the hop, get on your face for like 5 minutes straight. Or I'm
I've
sorry.
never seen this side of you.
Sorry. I think they can only IT us for like 90 seconds or something, legally.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but every Marine knows. If you're a Marine watching this, IT sessions are never 90 seconds.
Dang.
Yeah,
Who do
but
I have to call?
all right.
Mr. Marine?
So I'm like,
Or
oh,
Miss?
let me go ahead and hurry up, go to the head, and I'll hurry up and get back. Like I'm thinking these aren't even my drill instructors, so it doesn't matter. Like they're IT and guys, that's their guys.
Yeah. Just
Go
be
to the
very
head.
quiet.
Right. I
and
go
walk
to the
by.
head, I finish up and everything, and I'm just diddy bopping on the way back to the, to the auditorium because I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I'm taken care of. And I hear one of the drill instructors go, all right, recruit, get out my face. As soon as he gets up, he goes, hey, recruit, get over here. I stop in my tracks. I'm like, oh my God, I think he's talking about me.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he goes, what did I just say? And I turn, he's like, get over here, get on your face right now. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, sir.
Dang, you got jumped.
Why are you doing this to me? Plus, like I said, we was in San Diego. So it's hot. There's sand everywhere. Now I'm sweating. I'm like pushing on my face. I'm doing side struggle hops. I'm planking, more push-ups. I got sand just all over me.
Dang.
And he goes, all right, get up, go back. Go back into the auditorium.
And you're just supposed to go back like normal?
Yep.
Like that's just a Tuesday?
It's just a normal day in boot camp. Yeah. And go back into the auditorium. All my guys, they like lean forward and look at me because I just got like sand caked all on the side of my face.
They're like, what did you go through?
Yeah, they look at me and he's like, what happened? I was like, don't go to the head. And that was
like a single tear coming down your face.
Just one tear. Don't go to the head.
That, yeah, I can attest when I was in school because it sounds like similar. Like, I don't know, in my brain, I was just imagining like a schoolhouse. And so I think about like my community college days and stuff. But I never was, quote unquote, jumped by an F45 instructor who was yelling at me when I went to the bathroom.
Yeah, and imagine you're a little
terrible.
17, 18-year-old kid, and you got this swole dude just yelling in your face for 5 minutes straight.
I'm just going to pause, for, to let that sink in, that there are a lot of things that you've experienced in the Marine Corps that are slightly, not inappropriate, but, like, not good.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more trauma there than just, being told to do an F45 workout after the bathroom. I mean, that sucks,
yeah,
but,
sucks,
like, that's not a fun job for anybody, I would say, other than the person telling you what to do.
Right. Right.
if you're sick.
But yeah, the other trauma is actual trauma, so we'll stay
Yeah,
away from that.
we're gonna keep this as lighthearted as we
Yeah.
can. I have quite a few horror stories. Anybody who has worked in the service industry can probably agree with me that you just experience so much trauma from not just like the people that you work with, but also just like customers and stuff. And I had quite a few to think of. One that really comes to mind, it's kind of shorter than yours because it's not really a story, it's just kind of an experience. But I used to work at Starbucks when I was in high school. I worked at the Starbucks at the top of the hill in Roslyn, in Arlington, Virginia. If you know, you know. I worked there for almost a year when I was a senior in high school. And they're gonna, I feel like they're gonna come after me if I say this, but it's true, you know. So if they do, I can just be like, well, I want to see your exterminator records from these
Right.
years because I worked there when the exterminator was coming in. And yeah, there were cockroaches in the espresso machine at the Starbucks that I worked at. And like it was just kind of a problem because we had like at the top of the hill, there was our dumpsters right next to us. That was kind of like downhill from like you had to kind of like push them a little bit uphill. So I don't know if like the location or the fact that there was so much construction happening
Yeah, that definitely plays a role.
that probably didn't help, but there were cockroaches that lived in the espresso machine in Starbucks. And so if you've ever seen an espresso machine, there's like grates and stuff, and then like the
Mm,
spouts where the espresso comes out. And at the top, we would have the
the
beans, you
beans.
know,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
beans would, we would ground the beans, and that's how you would make the espresso.
Had some
And
ground cockroaches in there.
that's that me espresso. So yeah, so I'd be working on bar and sometimes like a cockroach would literally like crawl out and you would see it like right where the espresso was coming out. And one time I was on bar and obviously like I'm not going to apologize for it. A cockroach came out and I kind of squealed cuz I was like, "Oh my god, like it's right by my hand." And my manager, Margaret, karma probably got you already. She was not nice.
She gets my grouch face. Margaret.
Margaret, Margaret yelled at me. Like she pulled me in the back and she was like, "You can't be reacting that way when customers are around cuz they might see like what's going on." And I was like, "I get you, but also like I'm not going to apologize for that." I definitely Margaret and I didn't really get along. I would always just think about it like, are there cockroaches literally ground up in the
Oh,
espresso?
it definitely is.
Just don't
Definitely.
think about it too hard.
You
But,
know.
you know, I guess like there are like I don't know. I don't know what the health code requirements are or
It was
something, but
definitely a violation there.
and one time we got like another espresso machine and then it didn't work and like the one that had the cockroaches was working and it was like what was the point of getting the other espresso
Mm.
machine? That was the whole thing. But yeah, and then another like related horror story to my time at Starbucks. When I left, I quit in the middle of a rush, which like not good timing, but also I was fed up. If you've worked in the service industry, you know that like once you reach that breaking
Boiling
point,
point.
you are out of there. And I was at that point. It was the summer. I had graduated. I was like already going to quit. Like I was going to go off to school and I was going to leave in like 1 or 2 months. But my manager, actually, she was my assistant manager that they had hired. And when I quit, she physically restrained me from
Yeah, I
leaving the
remember you
store.
telling me this. Yeah.
That was like, I think back about that and I'm like, that was actually low key traumatic because I also have my issues with childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Probably not as bad as yours, but definitely with like feeling entrapped. And so, like, she literally, actually, it was one of my colleagues. I feel bad because her and I were friends. She held me while the other, like, I wish I remembered her name because it wasn't Margaret. I shouldn't be naming names.
But at the same time, though,
Yeah,
that's
they literally held me in the back from leaving. And I just started like screaming, honestly,
well, I
because
mean,
I was
like,
like, this is not
literally,
happening.
you're in the middle of a rush
Hmm.
and you already lost one person. So you're gonna sacrifice another person to
Yeah.
restrain them? Like, that makes no sense at all because
Hmm.
you already need help.
Yeah, I think actually, because I talked about this on my TikTok. I did one of those like candy salad things, and that was I think one of the stories. Because I remember somebody was like, "Did you report them? Like,
Yeah,
did you report
yeah,
it?" And when I
kidnapping.
quit, I actually right, it is actually kind of like kidnapping because if you're entrapping someone and keeping them from
Yeah,
leaving, like it is like low key kidnapping. But yeah, it ended up that I just like I was like screaming. I was like, "Let me go!" I was freaking out. I don't like being entrapped. Big time claustrophobic over here. So I just started like screaming and they let me go and I grabbed my bag and I just rushed out. And I remember it was a rush. So there was like a whole group of people back there and this was a small store. So like I'm pretty sure people heard me and I wanted to tell them, because I was like crying at that point, I think. And like I'm walking out and I wanted to tell the people in the line like what had happened. But then I was like, I'm probably just gonna look crazy. So I just walked out and I called my ex-boyfriend,
yeah.
not, my high school boyfriend. And I was like, this is what happened. And
I would have walked out and they got roaches.
it was, yeah, like full on. And it was just such a terrible experience. And I just had to walk out and be like, all right, like, it'll just continue to operate. But yeah, I remember I filed a report with corporate, but at that point, like, I don't think that I had saved my Starbucks code. Like you have like a certain when you're a Starbucks
Like an
like
employee
partner, you
code.
have an employee code. They call you something other than an employee. I forget what it is, but I had a code and I didn't remember it. Like and I needed it to like file stuff. So eventually like I got as far as I could, but they gave me like a really hard time and it was just one of those things that like I didn't know any better. I had just graduated high school. I wanted to move on with my life and I just didn't follow up with the report. But yeah,
Yeah,
I know I definitely filed something. So if they have any issues listening to this, I will find my code somewhere
yeah,
and I will get justice. But
yeah.
yeah, that was like a fun, not so fun job. I know all about coffee now, but let me tell you, people who haven't had their coffee in the morning are like the worst customers. Starbucks was the worst job I ever had.
Yeah. Yeah, my worst job. I had two worst jobs, but
What were
yeah.
they?
The windows, roofs, and doors.
Selling them?
Yeah, selling them. Those were honestly, I had some great moments with it, but I had a lot of terrible moments
Because
with
some
it.
of the people were really nice. You had the opposite experience. Like
Yeah,
the people were nice, but like
yeah.
the selling
But
experience was
no, it's
terrible.
just the actual company was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
On top of the fact that like I got paid $200 every 2 weeks. Which, speaking of this, if you guys listened to the other episode when I spoke about how I made $200 every 2 weeks as a car salesman, so therefore I left one job making $200 a week selling windows and doors to go to another one selling cars for $200 a week. Granted,
Yeah.
they both were commissioned, so some people will be like, oh, well, like, you just didn't try hard enough. Windows, roofs, and doors, for the first 3 weeks, I couldn't sell anything.
Yeah, you weren't allowed
I
to, so you
wasn't
couldn't
allowed
even
to.
make any money.
Right. Not making any money from that. On top of that, I had to use my own vehicle, wasn't getting compensated for like
Yeah.
mileage or gas.
That car was falling
They
apart.
yeah, they gave me a window, like a full-on gave me a window
Mm-hmm.
to carry around with like all of these other supplies, on top of a ladder too, and then charged me for it.
Mm-hmm.
And every little bit of my commission that I made went to pay that off first before I can
Yeah.
even make anything. And then when I quit, I didn't even get to keep the stuff. So I was like, I just bought it to give it back
Yeah.
to you. And then with the cars, it was the same thing. I mean, they didn't give me a window, but I
Yeah.
had to wait about 3 months before I can actually start selling cars. And then when I did, they took my commission. So
How was it like dealing with customers though as a car salesman? Did you have any experiences with people being like really rude or
not any negative ones. Like I said,
I remember you made buddies there.
yeah, the only bad times was literally just with management, especially like selling cars. All of the managers there, they pick favorites.
Oh,
So like you'd get references or
it's like
referrals.
high
Sorry,
school?
yeah, you'd get like referrals or like they get like a phone referral, and instead of them going, "Hey, you're new, let me help walk you through this," they go, "Oh well, Johnny there has made 100,000 in commission this month, and we got a phone referral, so we'll give it to him." And it's
Yeah,
like,
that's not fair.
yeah, why? I understand you have certain closers, but like I'm new,
Mm-hmm.
like me and these six other people that are new, we're trying to learn.
Mm-hmm.
We can't learn if you don't give us anything. And we
Right.
couldn't walk the lot. That wasn't a thing. Like they had their closers walking the lot. So
What does walking the lot mean?
like how You'll get some people who come on as like an online referral. Some people will come as a phone referral, but then you'll have some people who just pull up to the lot and just walk around.
Oh,
You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
as a new salesman, we could not just walk the lot.
I guess that makes sense because you're not trained yet.
Right. But then how the hell am I supposed to get any sales? If I can't walk the lot, if I can't answer the phones, because it's not like anybody has the direct number to your desk. Whenever they call whoever the floor person is, the manager on the floor, and then they divvy it out. Online, like it was literally I had to sit at my desk all day and either look and see who they had already contacted that didn't say yes and try to call them and nag them to come in, or just somehow get lucky with a friend or family. Like honestly, it was a terrible job.
So it took like forever to even be able to make the money that, car salesmen thrive off of.
Right. And then I remember one time I went outside, and as I'm outside, like I'm just kind of looking at the lot, like I can't actually be walking the lot, but I'm walking the lot. And I'm looking at one of the four Raptors because I like trucks, and obviously I'm learning about all of these vehicles. So I'm taking the time to look at them. And as I'm doing that, some random guy walks up to me, blue jeans, white t-shirt, just looks like a regular Joe Schmo off the street. And he goes like, "You like this truck?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's a pretty nice truck, like, I mean, I could tell you everything about it." And he's like, "Oh yeah, like, what do you know about it?" So I just kind of start giving him a little spill about what I know about the truck. And he's like, "Cool, like, do you guys got any in other colors?" Not even thinking about it, honestly, because like when it comes to the whole salesman thing, I never wanted to feel like a sleazy salesman.
Yeah.
So like I'm just informing you. I'm not trying to sell you on it.
Yeah, you were just telling him the
Yeah.
specs.
He goes, "Oh, cool. Like that's perfect. Like I love this color. How much is this one usually going for?" And I think that one was marked at like 85 because a Ford Raptor isn't a cheap vehicle, But
No.
that was relatively cheap considering all the accessories that you can add on. But I'm like, yeah, this was about 85.
Yeah, that's
And
crazy. Yeah.
he goes, "Okay, cool. Like, yeah, I'll take it." And I go,
What?
"Okay, I mean, yeah, let's do it. I guess." So I walk inside and I walk to the manager, and I'm like, "Hey, I got a guy outside right now that wants to buy this Raptor." Like I was just having a conversation with him,
Yeah.
and apparently what I said was enough for him to want to buy
Yeah,
it.
you didn't sell it. You
Yeah,
just told him
right.
what was going on. Yeah.
So he goes, "Oh, cool, because like you don't have like the qualifications to, or not even the qualifications, because technically I have my salesman's license,
Yeah.
but like I hadn't filled out any paperwork before or anything like that, so I didn't know what to do." So he's like, "Cool, I'll help you out with this one." Long story short, he took the
He
sale
took the
for
sale.
himself.
He
And I
got the
didn't, yeah,
commission.
and I didn't find this
The
out
right
until
thing to do was he should have split that commission with you.
right, because honestly, I put that work in. Like,
Yeah,
yes,
like,
you
yeah.
filled out the paperwork,
Mhm.
but you don't really fill out that
that's
much
so
paperwork, bro.
trashy.
Because
Ha.
but the people who really fill out the paperwork is the financing team, who you
Yeah.
have to send them to anyways. So, yeah, workplace horror. All right,
Mine
next
is
story.
kind of
Yours.
crazy. Well, not crazy, but it's like I look back on it and I think that my life could have been in a very different place if things had gone different than how they did. So one of my other jobs that I had when I was in college, and at one point when I was in college, I actually had 5 jobs. 5 different part-time jobs. Not all of them were paid because I wanted to
All
work
at
in
the same
sports.
time?
All at the same time. Yep, my sophomore year in the spring semester, I had 5 jobs. I worked as a student scribe in the disabilities office, so I would attend classes with students with disabilities and take notes for them
That's
if they
sweet.
weren't able to. Yep, I was paid for that one as well. It was actually one of my highest paying jobs. I also worked at Casa Rosada in Alexandria, Virginia, in
We
Old
love
Town.
you guys.
The absolute best gelato you can get. It's authentic gelato. It's ran by an Argentine or Argentinian couple. They're the sweetest. That was my highest paying job. I actually made like $14 an hour, which was way higher than minimum wage. So I worked at the gelato shop. I was also a student ambassador at Northern Virginia Community College. That was also a paid job. So I had 3 paid jobs. And then I was also I was a guest services representative at the Washington Nationals. So if you go to a baseball game and you see people walking around with like, the Nationals shirt and they're, watching the seats, I actually was in the section of third base. And so I was in Bryce Harper's section when he was
Mm.
still with us and with the Nationals. He's not dead. And
Right.
he,
R.I.P. Bryce Harper.
so I actually had one of the best working spots in the house because I was able to watch from third base in the Section 100. So I had 4 paid jobs and 1 unpaid job. I worked with the Washington Commanders at the time. They were called something different. So if I slip up there, I apologize. But yeah, the name has changed now to the Commanders. I was a partnership marketing intern, and that was unpaid. It was also one of the worst jobs I've ever had. But yeah, so at one point I had 5 jobs and I never did that again because it was insane. They were all part-time, so I was just balancing as much as I could. I was working nonstop. I was also a full-time student. I digress. That's actually not the point of the story, but you asked me, so I
I didn't
told you.
ask.
Oh, okay.
Go put that on me.
Well, that was traumatic. That was traumatic for different reasons. It was just crazy that I was even doing that. I wanted to go to Georgetown so bad,
Yeah.
and I knew that I couldn't afford it, and I ended up going anyway and took out student loans. So here we go. This is how I loop the stories together. I got a job as a cocktail waitress when I was at Georgetown, and it was actually one of the highest paying part-time jobs I've ever had. I worked at Le Meridian in Roslyn, Arlington, which is right next to Deloitte. I don't know if it's their headquarters, but it's a big Deloitte office in Roslyn. I believe the hotel is still there. I haven't seen it change or anything, but let me tell you, I made bank at that job. I made on basically average $1,000 a week as a cocktail waitress at that hotel. And the only reason why was because of Deloitte. They would come in at like right on the dot, 5:00 p.m. as soon as their offices were, their work was done. They would all come down and they would put on the company credit card their 3 rounds of wine, all their appetizers. They would host intern happy hours there, which meant that it was an automatic 20% tip added on top. And oh my goodness, we are talking sometimes multi-$1,000 tabs. And I made bank. But I also had one of my most traumatic work experiences ever at this job. So definitely a trade-off. I had multiple traumatic experiences there actually because my manager was remember Miranda?
Yeah, I remember.
Miranda. I remember all their names because it was so traumatic.
I tried to forget everybody's
I
names.
get that. I wish I could. But yeah, so when I was working there in the summertime, they decided to open an outdoor Tex-Mex, Mexican-American cuisine, outdoor eating area, and they had set up an entire kitchen outside. They built it up into a really cute little courtyard eating area, and they were like, you're going to be out there serving, which I wasn't happy about because the menu was like significantly cheaper. So like the tips were literally nothing. Like people wouldn't even tip out there. But I digress. When I was out there one time, they had told me, go get the Coronas. They had Coronas. I was supposed to go out there and get it. And keep in mind, like, I'm young. I'm in college. I don't really know my way around a kitchen. I'm not a chef. I'm just a server. I went to go get the Coronas, and they're all in glass, like glass can Coronas.
Glass bottled.
Glass bottled. Thank you. They're all glass. They're all glass. They're glass bottled Coronas, and they're right next to an oven. So I go to grab them, and they're, like, if you've ever grabbed like a lot of beers together, they're usually like grouped together with like in like a cardboard box, type thing, in a cardboard box. But they were exposed, they were like outside of the box, but glass at the bottom or cardboard at the bottom, so they were in a box, but they were fully exposed. So I go to grab them and I pull them towards me, and I was crouched down because they were next to the oven, like at the bottom, and I pull them out.
You hear that?
Yeah, well, actually, that's not what I heard. I heard like a roar. Like it sounded like a huge roar. I thought like there was a fire somewhere that had erupted. And actually, what had happened, like I stand up because I'm like, what the heck just happened? And I look down because I immediately felt very wet. And I looked down and I realized all the Coronas had exploded on me.
Yeah.
And sure enough, then I started feeling stinging. And I realized I had glass all over me. And I was wearing a t-shirt, so thankfully, like, it had caught all the glass, like, it hadn't hurt me, but I was wearing shorts because we were outdoors and I was
Yeah.
working the outdoor patio, so they made me wear shorts. And I look down and I just see, like, blood dripping down my legs.
Mm.
And I just, like, stood there for a second, and I was like, "That was lucky." You know? Like, I actually
Yeah,
wasn't
imagine
really,
like
like,
if your
upset.
face was there
Exactly, and that's where I think, like, my life could have been so much more different, and this happens to people
all the time.
every
Yeah.
day. Every day there are workplace horror accidents, you know, where people lose limbs, they lose their eyesight, their you name it, and I just felt really lucky that nothing had happened more drastic in that moment. But yeah, I even have a picture, we'll overlay it, because I was young, you know, I was a student, and I didn't know anything about worker safety or, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that you could report these things or that you should.
That you
And,
should.
my coworker, Ashley, shout out Ashley, she was the best. Everybody who is listening that has worked a service job, I know you know that you had a best friend that you worked with in the service industry. Like, it's just a thing. You always find like a sister or a brother, and she was mine. And she really looked out for me. She was like, Hannah, like, I need to take a picture of you because first of all, she was laughing. And because I was like really shook up, and she's like, you're fine. Like, let's get a picture. Like, this is funny. But also, we need to document this because
Yeah.
you are bleeding. You have glass all over you. So yeah, she took that picture for me. And I went and submitted like the workplace incident report, and they gaslit me into thinking it was my fault.
Why were you picking up
That's
coronas?
a little bit of more trauma there that I remember I reported one of my managers for being like for harassing me, like for being terrible, and they gaslit me into thinking that that was my fault too. And I got HR involved, and she was horrible. And yeah, this is bringing up bad memories.
I got one more.
Okay, go ahead.
Mine, it's more so funny. Back to the Marine Corps. Because a lot of my trauma that was funny was in the Marine Corps, surprisingly. But I was a diesel engine mechanic or technician to start off my first 4 years. And I was with the maintenance unit. We had a super big lot with 7 tons, Humvees. We eventually got MRAPs and stuff like that. But if you've ever seen a 7 ton, it's like one of the big 6-wheeled vehicles that the Marine Corps has.
Mhm.
Or I think the Army also has some. But we had like regular ones, and then we had up armored ones, which are the ones that are made to go overseas. In a maintenance unit, what you do is to help prevent all of the vehicle's batteries from dying. Every morning we'd go out and start them up.
Because they have to be warm.
Well, that, but then also because you don't want the batteries to die, because then
Oh.
we have to replace all the batteries, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, which then just becomes more expensive and so on and so forth. So we'd go out every morning, start them up for about 30 minutes to an hour, then shut them all off, and then continue about our day. So I'm doing my job, you know, little PFC Daniels, walk outside, and I'm starting up
Aw.
all these vehicles, you know, smooth face and everything. After about an hour or so, I start going back around, shutting them off, right? And I think it was more so because I got complacent, you know? And I hop out of one truck after I turn it off. And as I get ready to hop into the next truck,
Mhm.
I hear something fall out of my pocket.
Mhm.
So I'm like, oh, let me bend down to pick that up. Well, slow me, I didn't even keep in mind that, hey, a lot of these vehicles are here for a reason. We're a maintenance unit. We fix things. Well, one of the 7-ton doors, up armored vehicle, which has armor about this thick. Yeah.
I
The-
see where this is
right.
going.
The door swings open as I'm bent down. Well, I'll tell you guys, I stand about 5'8", 5'9" on a good day. Short king.
Short king.
Don't judge me.
You're not a short king, and who cares? What is
Right.
short anyway?
I got my little
It's
queen
all
here.
perspective.
Right.
You're tall to me.
I like bend down, I'm picking up this stuff, and at the same time that door swings open, I don't hear it because all of these trucks are running. And as soon as I stand up, I like stand fully up, and I'll say I probably got about 3/4 of the way there, and out of nowhere, boom! I got super stunned. I hear coins falling out of my pocket. Like,
Oh,
yeah,
no.
like after a little bit, my vision came back and everything. And I'm like, what the hell was that? And sure enough, it was this door that had just swung open on its own.
Dang.
Yeah. I didn't go to medical or anything. I should have. I definitely should have, because I'm pretty
That
sure.
probably was a concussion.
Yeah.
TBI awareness.
But those
That's
coins,
in
though, I
March.
made sure I picked up my 75 cents afterwards.
It's not worth losing 75 cents.
Definitely not. But yeah,
Dang.
that was fun. So
No.
if you ever sustain a head injury, get that looked at.
Yeah, seriously. Dang. Yeah, that's probably one of the more
Yeah.
violent
Yeah.
experiences you had in the
Well,
Marine
you know,
Corps.
like whenever you hit your head and stuff, you always get that little moment like, oh, am I bleeding? You know, so
Yeah,
I did my oh, okay, good to
no
go.
blood.
All right, no blood.
Can't relate.
I can still move. Right. Can't relate. But yeah, I was like, I'm still able to move and everything, so I'm good. Yeah.
Dang. The only other one I can think of is, the reason we started Salary Transparency,
Mm.
which is kind of a joint horror because a joint trauma, because we were, living together at that point, and what I was going through is kind of what we were both going
Yeah, we were
through.
both going through it.
But yeah, if I haven't told the story yet, I used to work at this company, a government contractor, and I was making $90,000 as a senior data analyst in the DC metro area. I, how I came about finding out that I was underpaid, it wasn't like I saw somebody's pay, and was like, "Oh my god, that's way
Oh
more than
my
me."
god, yeah.
It was actually a little bit more complicated. So when I started at the company, I would have said that if I had continued in my role doing what I was doing, 90K was enough. But what ended up happening was a month into starting this new job, my only other colleague was, reallocated to a different contract, moved. They basically
They
fired,
dropped
but
him from that contract.
yeah, when you're in contracting, they can't like fire you. They just move you to a different contract if you don't fit. And so, I had this colleague we were splitting the work 50-50, and he was working on a different contract than I was, or a
Well,
different
didn't he
team than
also
I
start
was.
off as your lead as
Yeah, he
well?
was my manager. Yeah, he was literally my lead. So they move him and they don't replace him. So I ended up within the next 6 months absorbing every single responsibility he had, working on every single team he had with no support because we were working on certain things together. Now, all of those projects that we were working on together, I was doing by myself. All the work he was doing, I was doing by myself. All the work I was still doing before, still doing now, all by myself. And I started, utilizing new skills, utilizing new technologies. I really stepped up to the plate. I was like, I could do this. I'm actually really an independent worker. So I kind of thrived working by myself and not really having too many checks and balances there. But it ended up completely burning me out. I remember one Friday night, it was like 4 o'clock, and one of our clients had asked us, to finish this project. I forget what it was, but I remember talking to my manager who, was involved on another contract. It was a mess. It was a mess.
Mess.
Tony, you remember Tony?
Yeah, Tony.
He was with a different contract, so he was kind of managing me, but wasn't really able to like help me because he was a different contractor. And so I tell Tony, hey, I'm gonna call it, at 5. I'll get you the rest of this project on Monday. And he like laughs and he's like, no, like they need this like right now. Like, are you able to finish it today? And I was like, well, it's Friday, like I'm off at 5.
Yeah, I hit
And
my hours, Brosh.
I actually got in trouble kind of for even saying that because I remember I ended up having to talk to the contractor, that I was working for the next week, and they had to explain to me officially, like, hey, you're salaried, which means that you don't qualify for overtime. You have to work as many hours as you need to for the client to be satisfied. And so that was the start of me working constant weekends, working like no exaggeration from like 6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
8
most
p.m. I
days.
remember.
And
Yeah.
I was, not getting up from my desk at any point. I was working straight hours, and it just started eating me up alive. And that's when I started wondering, I think I'm underpaid because when you start getting unhappy with your job, the next thing that comes up is compensation
Right.
and whether or not it was worth it. And I loved what I was doing. It was just too much. And I was like, I'd continue doing it for more money. I wanted to advance in my career. And then I started doing the research. And while I thought maybe I could have asked for 5 or 10K more, I actually realized that the majority of people doing the exact same thing I was doing with my market research, side shout out, if you need help with market research, we have a free market research guide at the free guides link at salarytransparentstreet.com. Back to the story. I used that all the information in that guide to find out that I was underpaid actually about $25,000. So, with that knowledge in mind, I went to my manager and I was like, "Hey, I did some research. You know how I've been saying I'm really unhappy. I'm also underpaid." And he, referred me up to management. I wrote a letter with all the accomplishments I've done at the company.
And all
And
your research too.
yes, and all my research. And Karen, my client, loved me. She loved the work I was doing. I brought a lot of value to the company and the contract. That's not just an exaggeration or me speaking, highly of myself. I know it because I knew it from the client. And despite all of that, despite the research, despite the value I brought, they told me, you're number one. I'd started at the company like 6 or 8 months before, and they said I had to be at the company at least
For
a
a
year
year.
before I even qualified for a raise. And then the other part was they didn't give out raises of more than 3 to 5% at any one time. And what I was asking for was significantly more than 3 to 5%. So I was, faced with the dilemma. Do I just continue working at this company, burning out and chasing my fair market rate? Or do I, now that I know I can achieve this, that I have all these skills, do I start looking for something else and get higher pay elsewhere? And that's what I did. I started doing a bunch of interviews. And in my first interview with the recruiter at another company for a senior data analyst role, she asked me, what are your salary requirements? And I was still, pretty upset about how everything had gone. And I was like, they've asked me this question before.
That's how they
And
tricked me.
this is how they tricked me, because I realized, that question really puts you in a imbalance of power, right? It's not my responsibility to make sure that you pay me fairly. It's your moral responsibility to pay your employees fairly. I
Right.
shouldn't have to guess what that number is. You should just know and do that. So
Well,
I
they know how much they're paying for roles. That's the thing.
Exactly. They have the access to the same information I do on the internet, if not more. So, you shouldn't be asking me to guess what the fair rate is. You should know it and offer it to me. So I flipped it on her, first time I'd ever done it, and I asked her, kind of nervous, but I was like, what is the budget for this role? Do you mind sharing it with me? And I give her so much credit because she's kind of the reason in a way that we are in this place today, because she told me what the budget was. She told me without missing a beat. She said the budget is 115,000, which really mattered because even though I knew that I was underpaid about $25,000, so I should have been making 110 to 120K, I was still going to undercharge myself because I was still in this position in my mind where I was like, don't ask for too much,
Yeah.
and I was like, if I can get 105, I'd be really happy. So I was probably going to ask for 100 to 105, if I had answered what my salary requirements are. But because she told me it was 115, I said, yep, that sounds
115.
great.
That's it.
That's
Yeah.
right in line with my expectations.
Yeah.
Like that works for me. And sure enough, I ended up getting the job. And when I quit, when I went to go put in my 2 weeks at that company, oh my God, this story brings me so much joy. But when I went to quit and put in my 2 weeks, my manager, my higher up manager, he said, what do we have to do? Like, what do we have to give you to make you stay? And I was like, I already named it.
Yeah. I told you.
I already told you. I already told you. And I put in my 2 weeks and I left.
Especially because you weren't even asking for 115 from them.
I was asking for, I think, 100. Moral of the story, always advocate for yourself. If your current company doesn't believe in your value, doesn't want to pay you your fair market rate, there is a company out there that will. And that is just not the company for you where you currently are. Don't let them, determine what your value is or lack thereof when you know what it is.
One thing that I would say for those of you who are out there looking for jobs and looking to change careers, it becomes very daunting at times, not gonna lie. Doing interviews, not hearing back, submitting your resume, not hearing back. But at the same time, I'd say just keep at it because eventually you'll get there. And everything seems so pressing at the moment. But if you just give it a little bit longer, tell yourself, all right, I'll wait one more month. or I'll wait another week. I'll send one more email, or I'll make one more phone call. That one could be the one. So
Yeah.
although it's very taxing to keep putting yourself out there, you know what goals you're trying to achieve, and don't give up until you achieve those.
Yeah. And, know your rights. A lot of times, I think of my workplace trauma and I know that there were things that I should have done differently if I had known what my rights were, especially when it comes to, accidents and potential harm that can happen in the workplace. Always remember that you need to look out for yourself. HR can be your friend, but at the end of the day, they are there to protect the company.
Yeah.
And so always make sure that if you feel like there is a wrongdoing happening, especially related to pay, document it. Take screenshots of everything, save everything in a folder because, the next day if you think you're not well compensated and you know that it's, an inequitable situation and they fire you, they'll take away access to all your, emails and such right away, which means that you won't
Right
be able to
away.
save that. I have a good workplace buddy who actually filed a report with the EEOC at the company that I ended up being fairly compensated at, but sure enough, they weren't perfect because they were underpaying her, and there was a lot of evidence of it being race-based.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they gaslit her. When I talked about it, the CEO reached out to me and said I didn't know the whole situation, even though she had shown me receipts.
And she spoke with you
And she
too.
spoke with me about it. He tried to scare me into not saying anything. And sure enough, her case with the EEOC has moved into mediation, meaning that there was proof and she did have a lawsuit on her hands. So don't let, authority or these companies change what you know is right, and know what your rights are. Gosh, this was a mix. I feel like this was funny, sad, stressful. I hope that if you're listening, that this was helpful and that you got a little giggle out of it and that we can all commiserate knowing that, work can be traumatic.
Yeah. So with that, let us know some of your trauma.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments
Yeah.
any of your workplace trauma
I'd
stories.
love to
Maybe
hear.
we can react to them maybe in the next
Yeah,
episode.
let's
That
do
would be
that.
a lot of
Yeah.
fun. We'll be covering our house buying experience in the next episode. But, thanks again to our sponsor, Public. Thank you for listening. Thanks for making this a charting podcast. And we'll
And with
catch you
that,
next time.
yeah, we'll finish off with a little costume dance.